Welcome to the Denver Gazette Sports Podcast. I am your host, Chris Schmedeke, and today we are brought to you by Applewood Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. They have been serving Denver residents for 50 years. They are the proud sponsor of the Colorado Avalanche, and they are the proud sponsor of this podcast, where today I am joined by Chris Thomason to break down the Broncos' crazy 24-22 win over the Buffalo Bills. Chris, have you recovered from your trip to Buffalo and just the insanity of that game?
That was quite the game. And, I think I was on deadline at the end with like three different stories and having no idea who was going to win. And then Will Lutz misses the first field goal. So I go back to writing. Okay, they lost. Oh, wait a minute. Penalty flag. Okay, maybe they're going to win now. So, yeah, it was a crazy ending. And, after blowing a couple close games at the start of the season, Broncos finally got a last-second one to go their way.
So the Broncos moved to 4-5 with this win. The bottom of the AFC, besides like the really bad teams, is kind of a mess. It's very, very jam-packed. But the Broncos are right there now. So 3 straight wins. Can you feel something kind of turning in that locker room a little bit?
Yeah, most definitely. The team is playing much better, and they've gotten players back from injury. I mean, they had not a single player on the injury report entering the Buffalo game. PJ Locke hurt his ankle. We'll have to see what happens there. But Kareem Jackson is back, so he'll move into the starting lineup. So they seem to have a wave of momentum. And what's kind of funny is that I think we might have even talked about it here. I was referencing the Buffalo game. I was saying, well, that could be a tough one, but then they got 3 winnable games in a row against Minnesota, Cleveland, and Houston. And then now all of a sudden, Minnesota has turned things around with Joshua Dobbs having replaced Kirk Cousins. Cleveland's coming off an impressive win over Baltimore, although they now don't have Deshaun Watson for the rest of the season. And we've seen what Houston's doing under CJ Stroud. So those games become tougher, but I think all of those teams are kind of similar, and those games could go either way.
Well, I was going to bring up the schedule later, but let's go ahead and talk about it now because the Broncos have to win these home games. These next 2, I mean, they don't have to, but these are 2 winnable games, and especially it was announced the Browns are going to start Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or I think I got the names right there. It's not PJ Walker. It's the other guy that's going to start for Cleveland, at least this week. So, the Broncos have a chance to kind of get going here. And, you and I talked about 6-6 being a real possibility. I mean, now they got a chance to be 6-5 going into that Houston game. And, the Houston's a young team. They're on a roll. Can the Broncos defense get to them? So the Broncos have a real opportunity here.
Yeah, and there's added emphasis now on tiebreakers. Obviously, yeah. Minnesota's in the NFC, but then you got Cleveland. That's a team they could be fighting with potentially for a playoff berth. Tiebreaker comes into effect. And then you got Houston. Tiebreaker could come into effect. And as crazy as it sounds, they've got the Buffalo tiebreaker. Yep. I mean, the Bills are only a half game ahead of the Broncos. They're 5-5. And the Broncos are 4-5. So, yeah, they if they continue to play good ball, I mean, there's still a lot of teams they got to leapfrog in the AFC, but the playoffs would not be unreasonable.
So let's talk about Monday's game. So the Broncos forced 4 turnovers, 2 on the first 2 drives of the game, 1 on the first play of the game. Unfortunately, Denver only turns that into 6 points, but this defensive turnaround has been amazing, honestly, in the last couple of weeks from where they were. So, first of all, how much credit does Vance Joseph get? And also, how much does this have to do with having finally the right guys on the field?
Well, I wrote a little bit about the turnaround in today's Gazette. And basically, the key was players remained confident. They kept practicing hard. I mean, at 1-5, everybody thought the season was over. I mean, including at 0-3, people thought that the season was over, especially after losing 70-20 to Miami. But they stayed the course. They got some key players back. due to injury. And yeah, you got to give some credit for Vance Joseph. He never panicked. He remained on an even keel. And it all kind of started in a loss Thursday night, October 12th at Kansas City, 19-8, but the defense played really well that night. And then the defense continued to play well. And now they've won 3 straight. So the defense has been strong 4 games in a row.
And how much, I mean, do you think this turnaround has to do with, they go with the younger guys at pass rusher. They get rid of Frank Clark. They get rid of Randy Gregory. And then they switched to Fabian Moreau at the other corner. And, I mean, he's made plays all over the place. And they switched the nickel back to McMillan. Joe Buck was saying it differently. I think it's McMillan, right?
They just call him J-Mac. But
okay, so J-Mac. We'll just go with J-Mac as well. But, it seems like Sean Payton and the team as a whole has kind of pushed the right buttons on the defense as well with some of these player switches.
Yeah, they absolutely have. The lineup changes have worked quite well. And now, I mean, Baron Browning actually is starting over Nick Benito because Benito came in for Randy Gregory and boom, had that great game against the Bears. But Benito has the type of temperament that he's not going to complain that he's technically not starting. So they've got a nice rotation there at outside linebacker. I mean, Benito's still getting plenty of snaps. But let me make another point, how much the offense has helped the defense in terms of the running game controlling the clock. They had 40 carries against Kansas City, kept the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. Then they got 38 carries against the Bills, helped keep the ball away from Josh Allen. So that in effect, and Russell Wilson is playing in a conservative manner, but it has been working. All of that is helping out the defense.
Yeah, I was going to jump to the offense next, and that's like you said, 38 carries in Monday's win. Russell Wilson did throw the ball 29 times, but they had those drives where they had to get down the field, so that made a little bit more sense. But the offense is, I mean, they probably pretty much did everything they wanted on Monday except score more points. I wrote that in our report card. Like, they definitely could have scored more points, but is this is their philosophy now? Is there going to be more ball control? Does Sean Payton really like that, or is it just like the fact that they're winning?
Yeah, I mean, Sean Payton has always been about solid running game. It's just that Drew Brees still put up fantastic stats that overshadowed when Saints backs were doing pretty well. I mean, he always has wanted to, establish the run to set up the pass, which is a mantra that obviously many teams follow. Russell Wilson's not putting up the crazy numbers that Drew Brees did, of course, and I don't think he's going to in this offense. And he's got good receivers, but he doesn't have game breakers, and unless they decide that Marvin Mims indeed still is on the roster and they try to get the ball to him. But I mean, I think just trying to win any way they can, and the formula has kind of worked the last 2 weeks against named teams in the NFL, Kansas City and Buffalo. There's no reason to change it, I wouldn't think, heading into Sunday's game against Minnesota.
So you mentioned Marvin Mims, who doesn't see the ball on offense except if it's a bad trick play that it seems to get busted. But he did win AFC Special Teams Player of the Week just this morning. Without his 2 returns, the Broncos may not win that game on Monday.
Yeah, 2 returns for 44 yards in the game, a kickoff return for 31. I mean, you just look at his special teams numbers, they're eye-popping. He's averaging 20.7 yards per punt return, 33.1 kickoff return. He doesn't have enough returns yet, only 9 punt returns and 7 kickoff returns to qualify among the league leaders. But, if he did, he'd be right there at the top. He's turned out, even if he doesn't catch that many more balls, I mean, he's turned out to be quite a fine second-round pick. And going back to April, that was one of the major reasons that they drafted him. I mean, I don't know if they thought he was going to make a major contribution right away on offense, because obviously they had Tim Patrick then as well before he suffered a season-ending injury. But he was drafted with the thinking he's going to be a returner in his first year, and an effective one, and he has been effective, obviously.
So let's go back to Russ a little bit. There was some Russ magic in this game. There was the fourth down play with the great catch by Cortland Sutton that scored the Broncos touchdown. There were those plays where he escaped the pocket and kind of just flipped it to the Samaje Perine sighting as he made some big plays down the field, but also like Russ was efficient. And he was still sacked 4 times, but 2 touchdowns, no picks. I feel like this. I mean, this is just what Russell Wilson is now, right?
Yeah, we keep bringing up game manager. I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty much what he is. But for you pro football historians, Bob Greasy in the 70s was a game manager, and he's in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So, hey, not all that bad at all. And he seems to be fine and content that he's not putting up gaudy numbers, but his passer rating is excellent. And you mentioned some of those key plays the other day. I mean, that was one of the more spectacular plays of the season, the 4th and 2 play to Cortland Sutton, 7-yard line, and he's drifting like way back and looks like he's just chucking it up in desperation into the end zone, and boom, lo and behold, touchdown pass.
Well, and even on that final drive where, he gets sacked on 2nd down, right? I can't remember. No, yeah, 2nd down. And then he throws the ball up to Judy on 3rd down under the same pressure. The throw didn't get there, but he still made the right play. And I mean, it was nice to see him get rid of the ball when he needed to, because if they take another sack there, that game's over.
Yeah, I mean, a penalty turned out to be the key play, obviously, in that final drive. And, he laid it up there. They got the pass interference call, 28-yard pass interference, and that set up the 2 attempts for the winning field goal. Obviously, the penalty on the Bills, 12 men on the field. And so the Broncos can thank the Bills for some self-destruction there at the end of the game. But, earlier this season, it was the Broncos self-destructing.
So I'm going to ask you about special teams a little bit, because it was a very up and down day on special teams for the Broncos on Monday. Like we talked about Mims having the good returns. Will Lutz did technically go 4 for 4 in field goals, even though he did miss the winner. And then, but they had the missed extra point and the botched snap. And I feel like with the Broncos right now, their margin of error is not very big, and that could have killed them. It didn't, but I'm just saying, like, their margin of error is so slim that stuff like that can really hurt a team, this team.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, things would have changed with Buffalo going for a 2-point conversion, but those, like they did earlier in the game, but those botched extra points, they were down by 1 entering that frantic last drive, and turn those around, and they're up by 1. Yeah, so that'll be plenty of emphasis this week. We'll have to see. I mean, Lutz, you said, was 4 out of 4, and a couple of weeks ago, Sean Payton was hailing him as he could become an all-time great as a kicker, but still, he has those moments where you're like, oh, okay. I mean, and he also had the block kick the other week, but that wasn't really his fault. But yeah, the Riley Dixon thing was perfect snap. I mean, he just dropped it. Those things happen, and they'll just continue to do reps, and hopefully for the Broncos' sake, they won't happen again.
What did you think of them going straight fire drill on both those field goals at the end of the first half and at the end of the game?
I thought it was interesting strategy, but it's obviously, I mean, Sean Payton kind of mostly just shrugged it off, saying all you need is 17 seconds, and we had 23. So, they practice that stuff regularly. And if you think about it, if you spiked the ball just to stop the clock, so you're giving Josh Allen, I don't know, 16 seconds, and everybody kind of harkens back to what the Chiefs were able to do a couple of years ago in the playoffs. getting downfield against the Bills. So, and obviously Josh Allen has a very strong arm. So, overall, it seemed to be okay strategy, although it was interesting how Will Lutz did admit after the game that he kind of rushed it a little bit when he didn't have to. I mean, he kicked the first one with the clock moving and 7 seconds left. So, I think you talked to Lutz, you talked to your field goal unit, and you find out if how comfortable they are, because obviously he missed the first attempt.
Right. All right. So let's move on to the Vikings. Sunday Night Football in Denver this coming weekend. A game you and I probably thought was going to be flexed a couple weeks ago, but now two of the hottest teams in the NFL will match up on Sunday Night Football. The Vikings as well as anybody from your time in St. Paul. So what do the Broncos have coming into Denver this week?
Well, it's two similar teams that have turned their seasons around. I mean, in improbable fashion for different reasons. I mean, the Broncos 1-5 have won 3 straight, and nobody ever thought that would happen, especially with a 70-20 loss to Miami in their rearview mirror. The Vikings started out 1-4, and then they lose Kirk Cousins for the season. So nobody thinks that they're going to win 5 in a row, the last 2 with Joshua Dobbs as a quarterback. So that's what's happened. So 2 kind of improbable stories. And when the game was elected not to be flexed, some people thought, that's not a very attractive Sunday night matchup. But now it's turned out to be a pretty darn good game. And the Broncos now are starting to become a bit of a story. So maybe they'll have a future game now flexed to Sunday night rather than away from Sunday night.
Oh, well, I didn't even think about that, but that is a possibility. They still have one more primetime game. That game against New England on Christmas Eve is a primetime game. So that's, I don't know about that one, but I don't know if they can they flex that one? Is that
no,
one?
that's unflexible. That's, they're stuck with that one. And we'll just have to see who the Patriots head coach is for that one.
Oh, there we go. And then the Vikings may get Justin Jefferson back, right? We haven't heard yet, but
I anticipate that he will play on Sunday. I mean, they listed him as questionable for this past weekend's game. That might have been more gamesmanship just to give the Saints something to think about. But yeah, I would, unless he has a setback in practice this week, I would think he'll play on Sunday against Denver.
So you and I talked about the schedule earlier already. Like you said, they have Minnesota this Sunday. Then they have Cleveland coming here with no Deshaun Watson. Then there's that 3-game road trip, Houston, LA, Detroit. Whenever the Broncos go to LA, it seems like a Broncos home game at times. So I don't know. And they always seem to win there. But, they have to, they play the Chargers twice and the Raiders one more time. And like you said, Cleveland and Houston, this sets up for the Broncos to chase people down. And, they definitely have to win their home games. And, maybe actually beat the Raiders for the first time in a long time. But I don't think this could set up any better for the Broncos, even starting 1-5.
Yeah, I agree. And the Chargers are kind of a bit of a mystery team. I mean, they're much better than their record shows, and they have the tendency to not win close games, which is their history. So, and people are grumbling about Brandon Staley. So who knows what sort of shape the Chargers will be in when that game arrives. And then we touched upon earlier that the Minnesota, Cleveland, and Houston games all are a bit tougher, but there's so many teams all kind of jumbled together that are similar, and you can now maybe throw the Broncos into that particular jumble. But what the Broncos need to do, and you touched upon it earlier, is to reclaim that home field advantage long-term over what they're famous for. I mean, they've won now 2 home games in a row. They lost their first 3, and I wrote about how they were trying to avoid the first 0-4 home start in the 64-year history of the franchise. So they got that monkey off their back. I mean, that's kind of been the theme lately, getting monkeys off their back. They avoided an 0-4 home start. They broke a 16-game losing streak to the Chiefs, and then they broke a 7-game Monday Night Football losing streak. So we'll have to try to think of some kind of streak they're trying to break this Sunday.
So and they also broke some. They hadn't won in Buffalo since like 06 or something, right?
Yeah, it'd been a while. So yeah, think of a streak against the Vikings.
I can't remember the last time they played the Vikings.
Actually, I do. I was there. It was 2019. In Minnesota, the Broncos led 20-0 at halftime.
That's right,
and blew it and lost.
That's right. I couldn't remember when that game was. So, and I think the next streak they have to probably break is the Raiders on the last week of the season, because they haven't beat them in a while now either. But the Raiders are playing better.
7 straight losses there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Raiders are playing better since they got rid of McDaniels, which most teams do. So, all right, Chris, thanks for coming on and talking about this. I didn't think a couple weeks ago we'd be talking about, the Broncos going on this run, but things have definitely changed a bit. So thanks again for coming on. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on Apple and Spotify. Check out all of Chris's Broncos coverage at denvergazette.com, as well as all the other teams in the area from everybody. And Chris, we will talk Monday morning after a Sunday Night Football game with Minnesota. So we will talk to you then.
Hey, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.